Homage to the Triple Gem. So hello everybody, this is Bante Joe here, and still here at Gendagala Aranya. Vasa ends quite soon and then probably be here till mid-December. And so a gentleman from the US has actually come to visit me and has been staying here, and we've been having some Dhamma discussions, and he's been doing some meditation. It's been really nice to have a guest interested in meditation, interested in discussing the Dhamma. So one of the questions that he asked was, what is the role of Samvega? And basically, Samvega, is it always a good thing? And if one feels like depression or terror or anxiety in one's practice, should one go towards it or go against it? So Samvega, the translation that is sometimes used is terror, actually. It's this fear. But it's different than the fear that one feels in the hindrance of uddhacca kukucca, or anxiety and restlessness. So here the fear or the terror is basically a fear that one will be trapped in samsara and one won't find a way out. So it's a fear that one has towards the things that are going to cause one suffering. And it's coupled with a desire to escape. So it's not a paralyzing emotion. It's a motivating emotion. It's emotion that kind of gets one going. So people are motivated sometimes by like a carrot and by a stick. So they have this image of like a donkey going towards a carrot that's dangled in front of his mouth. And there's also the image of like a stick that strikes a horse or strikes an animal that one is riding to get it to go faster, and kind of for fear of the stick it goes. So Samvega is the stick portion. It's the fear that drives one to practice, and it's the fear that drives one to look for an alternative to all these various things that cause one to suffer. So its role is actually really, really important. Without Samvega, one essentially remains happy and contented in a situation which can and will deteriorate eventually and will eventually cause one suffering. So it can be closely related to heedfulness, this quality of the mind that ensures one is very careful in what one does so that one gets the results that one wants. So one of the important qualities of heedfulness actually is that it's a kind of balancing quality. So most qualities in the Buddha's teachings, with the exception of heedfulness, I think is the only one that he lists that you can't have too much of. But most qualities in the Buddha's teachings have almost like a near enemy. Like if you over cultivate them, then it causes problems. If you under cultivate them, then it causes problems. So heedfulness is this quality that's very careful to make sure that one is cultivating things, one is applying them in balance, not out of balance. So Samvega is like this. So its role is to propel one forward. Its role is to cause one to search for an escape. But it's the type of thing that one can do wrong. So the second question, Samvega basically meaning terror, is that always a bad thing? Is it always a bad thing to have terror? I mean, no, it's not always a bad thing, but it can be a bad thing. So if one cultivates Samvega in such a way that one feels paralyzed with fear, like, oh my gosh, I'm in this situation, I can't escape from samsara, it's too hard. The forces against me are too much. That's not the type of Samvega that one wants to cultivate. One wants to cultivate a Samvega that's balanced and is moving one towards the ends that the Buddha set out for one. So again, the role here is one of heedfulness, to make sure that one is cultivating Samvega properly. And to do this, one usually needs to balance it with other qualities. One needs to balance it with, they have a quality called pasada, it's like confidence, and also chanda, this desire to escape. So desire can be like the motivating factor. One sees the positives and one wants to go to them. This desire, chanda, it can be like something a little bit extreme, so a little intense. So the Buddha sometimes gives like similes for the way that one should cultivate desire that are pretty intense. So basically, if one notices that one has these unwholesome qualities in one's mind and one is not getting rid of them, then one should develop desire to get rid of them, like a man with his clothes on fire or his turban on fire would develop desire to put out the fire on his turban. So this desire as well, this chanda as well, it's not like not necessarily in a general sense the lukewarm type of desire one has towards like, oh, I'd really like a cup of coffee now, I'd really like an ice cream. It's like the intense desire of somebody engaged in a life and death battle. The desire that a warrior has to win, the desire that focuses their mind and focuses their energy in such a way that they can accomplish much more than they would before. So, in terms of whether or not one wants to go towards Samvega or depression or terror or despair in one's practice or against it, a lot of it depends on the state of one's mind and what's going on in one's mind. And it's partially the qualities that one has in one's mind that are good at the time, and it's partially the quality of the despair or the quality of the terror. Like, what is the quality of it? So one can kind of divide these things into the good quality of Samvega and the negative quality of the hindrance of uddhacca kukucca. This hindrance of uddhacca kukucca is a hindrance which basically causes one to be paralyzed a lot of the time. It's not something that is necessarily motivating. It's the type of thing that one is afraid, one is anxious, and one wants to distract oneself from that anxiety, and one just doesn't know how to go forward. It's often something that takes a worry about the present and paints a future that's so bleak that one can't see a way past that. So if we're talking about going towards a terror or a depression or a despair that has that quality to it, if it has this quality to it where it's something that is freezing the mind up, it's locking it in fear, and it's not allowing it to move forward, then going forward and cultivating that more will likely increase the problem. Now here when we talk about cultivating that more, it means focusing more on the things that are giving rise to that emotion. So usually the negative side of these things in terms of anxiety or fear or whatever it might be, the negative side of these things is this worry about what's going to happen in the future. And it's not a general worry about samsara, it's a worry that's usually specific. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I got this pain in my stomach. Or what am I going to do? I got this white spot on my arm. Is it cancer or is it not cancer? Or, oh, that guy, he looks like he's angry at me. Is he, my boss seemed angry. Is he going to fire me? And it's kind of these the anxiety and worry, this hindrance usually tends to be based on like specific things that one is afraid, one doesn't know how to overcome them. And as a result, it paralyzes one. It makes one unable to act, unable to do what's skillful, which is why it's a hindrance. It hinders one in doing what's skillful. So if one tries to go towards that hindrance and say stokes the fire of that, like, oh my gosh, yeah, my boss, he's going to make me, he might fire me. Even if one does that with Dhamma in mind, like this paralyzing emotion is there, and one's thinking, oh yeah, that's the way it is, this is things are impermanent, they're suffering, that I'm suffering, this is suffering right here. If one does that unskillfully, essentially what one is doing is one is feeding the causes of this terror. One thinks, oh yeah, this is suffering, I could get fired tomorrow, I could totally lose my job. And one doesn't have the presence of mind to view that with equanimity, then it's not a skillful action. It can be an unskillful action in some cases, because it's just going to stoke that defilement. On the flip side, Samvega, like a positive viewing of that emotion, is one where it's more of a general thing. It's usually not tied to a specific thing per se. It's like usually one starts to see a pattern in the way that suffering arises and falls away. I mean, there's a pattern to these things. I mean, we're the ones who are doing it. People are the authors of their own suffering all the time. And so there is a pattern to the ways in which it arises, the ways in which it falls away, and the ways in which happiness arises, the way in which happiness falls away. There's limitations to these things. There's a pattern over and over again to sensual pleasure. One searches after it, one builds up this desire for whatever it might be, the new promotion, or the marriage, or the new house, whatever it might be. There's this desire that builds up. The The moment comes when one gets it. One's mind is not even there at that moment. It's usually just swept away in some emotion. One isn't even paying attention to the feeling of the emotion. Again, one's mind is off to the future sometimes. Oh, what's going to happen with this now, Or one is just totally distracted. Then after a certain amount of time, usually not so long, that elation wears off and it has to be replaced again by another goal. So this is the nature of craving and the nature of the limits of sensual happiness. And it is also bound up with suffering. Suffering also has patterns in this way. They're tied to the happinesses that a person seeks. So Samvega is an emotion that's more associated with this general view of the causes and conditions that lead to suffering. And so it's not something that makes one specifically afraid, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my job. It's something that makes one generally afraid of samsara. And this is a positive thing. This is a motivating thing, because the Buddha has given us a way out. He's shown us the Noble Eightfold Path, and it's something that we can cultivate. In the same way a person is the author of their suffering, they can be the author, they can be the builder of a path out of suffering. So on the one hand, it depends how one is focused on the emotion. Is it this specific paralyzing fear, or is it more of a general building of terror, a building of concern over the possibility of being stuck in a cycle where one will suffer again and again because of seeing things with wisdom, seeing these patterns with wisdom? The one is positive, the other is more negative. The second aspect of this, and there can all obviously be more aspects, but we'll just break it down into these two today. The second aspect of this is how one's mind is internally in terms of the wholesome qualities that one has cultivated. So if one, for example, notices that, my boss is going to fire me, or I've got this, I got a spot on my arm, is that cancer? If one has been meditating and one has, some calmness in mind, some confidence in mind, one has gotten some joy from one's dana or one's sila or one's bhavana, one's meditation, then it puts one in a more secure position to look at the terror of this specific event in terms of the Dhamma. What is it that I'm doing to cause myself to suffer because of this spot on my arm? Or if cancer comes to my body, what is it that I'm doing to cause myself to suffer? And what can I do to put an end to that? So if one's mind is pulled back enough, if it has enough joy, if it has enough calm, then one can investigate in this way. And investigating in this way can bolster Samvega. One is seeing, what is it that I'm doing to cause myself to suffering, and where does the suffering come from? In this case, it would be coming from the body. It would be coming from a person's attachment to their body. And a person's attachment to their body is generally fueled by, the main one is the desire for sexual intercourse. But that is the kind of root, and it filters down into basically every single type of sensual pleasure. These are the reasons that a person keeps coming back for a body. They have these desires, and the flip side of these desires is hatred when these things are frustrated. It's the binding agent to all of the sensual realm. So this is where that quality that we talked about at first, in the first part of this discussion, of pasada or confidence, is like a positive emotion, or chanda can come in. When these positive qualities, these bright qualities that the Buddha recommends are in the mind, then one can investigate these negative things without them necessarily having to flip and turn into a monster, turn into paralyzing fear, turn into terror. It can be something where we can examine the causes and add them to the repertoire of our knowledge to build a greater and greater degree of Samvega. So, coming back to the very first question, the role of Samvega it's extremely important, actually. This past couple of weeks, I've been doing some research on an essay. And the essay is basically going to be addressing a question because there's this kind of a little bit of a view that's building in the modern world that stream entry is this like gradual process that's unnoticed. The fruition of stream entry is something unnoticeable. And in the canon and in living traditions, that's not the case. So I'm going to argue that position. But in any event, looking at these various cases in living traditions where people have attained stream entry and the ways in which they describe it, what seems to be, there's many things you can look at and say that this is a common element, but one thing that's a common element is that essentially people's desire, or their desire to leave the world, is very, very strong. Their desire to escape, to find an escape, a happiness beyond conditions, has built into something very, very strong. And the individual ways in which they do this are very inspiring. So actually this quality of Samvega, coupled with chanda, or coupled with a positive, like a quality of mind that's attractive, as well as this quality of Samvega that's repellent, a carrot coupled with a stick. When these two qualities grow strong enough that they're actually stronger than a person's desire for their life, they're stronger than a person's fear of death, then that can be something that enables one to make a breakthrough, to step beyond, to have a breakthrough to these significant attainments that people desire in their practice. So it's something very, very important, and it's something that can't be avoided. The Buddhist path doesn't proceed through complacency. It doesn't grow through a growing oneness or unity necessarily with the universe, where one is somehow content with one's role in the universe. It proceeds through the development of qualities like Samvega, qualities like chanda, a terror that builds when one looks at the results of attaching to conditioned things, a terror that builds when one sees what one's doing, what one is doing to cause oneself to suffer. And when this is coupled with a desire, when it's coupled with the desire for something better that's greater than one's life, greater than one's death, then this is where significant breakthroughs can be made in the path. So it's important not to neglect this quality, but also important to cultivate it well, so that it doesn't fall into terror, but becomes a general pattern that one sees that can spur one on towards things that are very significant.